Where's your proof? Or is this simply another sob story from a penniless pastry girl? A hush fell over the room. Lena stood, her hands dusted with flour, gaze unwavering, clutching a printed copy of the recipe her late brother had submitted 8 years prior. The manager leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips as if it were the most self-evident truth. Where's the proof? Or is this just another sob story from a broke pastry girl? Who do you truly believe they'll side with, me or you? Unbeknownst to them, the quiet new trainee observing from the corner was none other than Jackson Reeves, the actual CEO of Golden Harvest, operating undercover. And when he finally emerged from that room, a seismic shift began throughout the company, affecting everything from contracts and titles to the very people who retained their positions. Have you ever felt dismissed because of your background, or perhaps the nature of your work? If that resonates with you, and you still carry that feeling, comment 1. If you haven't, and hope you never do, comment 2. Jackson Reeves scrutinized his reflection in the worn mirror of a modest motel room. Nestled on the outskirts of Seattle, the salt and pepper beard, cultivated over the past 2 weeks, had grown in just enough to lend him a fatigued yet unassuming appearance. His custom-tailored suits remained at his San Francisco condo, now supplanted by thrift store jeans, a nondescript sweatshirt, and a ball cap strategically low enough to shadow his face. He raked his fingers through his deliberately tousled hair and nodded decisively. The transformation was complete. "So, Evan," he murmured to his reflection, testing the alias one last time, "ready for your inaugural shift at Golden Harvest?" A wry chuckle almost escaped him. 15 years prior, he had mortgaged every possession to establish the very first Golden Harvest location. He had personally kneaded dough, scrubbed ovens until they gleamed, and slept on flour sacks when an apartment was an unaffordable luxury. Now, with 37 stores spanning the nation and his name etched onto the Forbes Leaders to Watch list, he found he couldn't step into any of his bakeries without immediate recognition, or worse, a carefully orchestrated performance. This precisely was his reason for being here. The raw numbers were undeniable. Profit margins were steadily shrinking, employee turnover had dramatically spiked, and several flagship locations were raising significant red flags. He had engaged consultants, analysts, even a specialized customer experience firm. Yet, none could elucidate why Seattle's highest-rated location, a darling of Yelp and adored by food critics, was barely managing to break even. His father's wisdom resonated in his mind. Sometimes, you need to get your hands in the flour yourself to truly understand why the bread is going stale. Jackson slung his backpack over his shoulder and stepped into the pre-dawn chill of 4 a.m. The air held that distinct, crisp bite of Pacific Northwest spring morning, damp, hushed, and subtly electric. He made his way to his rented sedan, an unremarkable vehicle, and drove towards the city center, parking 2 blocks away from a bakery. From the exterior, the Golden Harvest flagship location appeared precisely as he had envisioned it. Warm-toned brick, golden signage, and an old-world charm, elegantly nestled amidst towering modern high-rises. Yet, what he witnessed inside took him completely by surprise. The lights were already ablaze. It was 4:45 a.m. Through the expansive front window, he observed a lone woman working in the kitchen, her auburn hair pulled into a tight bun, sleeves meticulously rolled, movements strikingly precise. She wasn't merely prepping ingredients. She was actively shaping morning buns, rolling, cutting, and folding with fluid grace born only from thousands of repetitions. She neither glanced up nor paused, her work akin to a symphony performed by a solitary, masterful instrument. Precisely at 5 a.m., the front door audibly unlocked with sharp buzz. A tall man in his early 30s, whose name tag identified him as Logan Pierce, opened the door and offered a polite smile. "You must be Evan," he greeted, "the new trainee from corporate." Jackson nodded, subtly adjusting his stance into the practiced, mild slouch. "Yeah, I appreciate you taking me in on such short notice." "No problem at all," Logan replied, gesturing him inside. "They've been dispatching people lately to align local processes, or whatever corporate jargon they're using now." He rolled his eyes, not with outright disrespect, but with a profound weariness of someone who had endured far too many memos from individuals who had never once pulled a baking tray from a 400-degree oven. Interesting, Jackson mused inwardly. That very alignment initiative had, in fact, been his own brainchild. Logan guided him past the still-empty display cases and across the gleaming, polished tile floors towards the rear of the bakery. The air was imbued with the intoxicating aroma of butter, cinnamon, and toasted sugar, a scent both rich and utterly indulgent. It was the kind of fragrance that compelled passers-by to pause outside the window and step inside, even if they'd had no prior intention. They finally arrived at the kitchen. The woman he had observed earlier remained focused on her work, not once glancing up. "That's Lena," Logan murmured, lowering his voice as if they were in a sacred space. "She's responsible for the morning buns and all the artisan preparation. Been here longer than I have. Doesn't talk much, and she's extremely particular about her station." Jackson remained silent, simply observing. Her hands moved with a fluid, almost automatic muscle memory, the kind born only from profound dedication, bordering on obsession. She wasn't merely a competent baker. She was undeniably world-class. Even amidst the quiet intensity of her work, there was an undeniable magnetism about her. It was a quality he had recognized years ago within himself. "What time did she arrive?" Jackson inquired. "She's invariably here by 4:30, Logan replied. "Sometimes even earlier. Technically, our prep begins at 5 o'clock. She simply arrives and commences work." The morning unfolded in a blur of introductions and comprehensive equipment walkthroughs. Jackson played his role convincingly, asking rudimentary questions like how to load the industrial mixer, feigning complete unfamiliarity with measuring yeast. Logan proved patient, helpful, and undeniably a competent floor lead, yet Jackson's gaze continually gravitated towards Lena. Every tray she gracefully slid into the oven appeared utterly flawless. Her morning buns, tightly coiled with rich brown sugar and cinnamon, emerged from the heat caramelized and golden, glistening just enough to perfectly catch the ambient light. By 7 a.m., the queue out front stretched around the entire block. Customers streamed in, specifically requesting her pastries by name, and departed visibly beaming. Around 9 a.m., during a brief lull, Jackson approached Logan. "Those buns are absolutely incredible." "Hers," Logan confirmed. "Entirely hers. People journey across the city just for them." She refuses interviews, declines to pose for promotional photos, and doesn't even permit her name on the display board. She simply works. She must be incredibly valuable. "Invaluable," Logan corrected. Then, after a reflective pause, he added, "But she remains an enigma. She rarely speaks, never socializes after shifts, works 6 days a week, sometimes even double shifts, and never takes any time off." Jackson nodded slowly, a dawning understanding settling over him. He recognized that intensity, that relentless pace, that particular work ethic. It wasn't born of ambition. It stemmed from sheer survival. And an instinct deep within him whispered that Lena Hart wasn't merely baking for a paycheck. She was baking for a profound reason. By mid-morning, Jackson had assimilated the rhythm of the floor sufficiently to remain unobtrusive. Logan maintained the team's momentum with quiet, unwavering efficiency, checking prep sheets, coordinating seamlessly with the front-of-house staff, and stepping in wherever an extra pair of hands was needed. The bakery hummed like a perfectly oiled machine, yet it was undeniably clear who truly made its wheels turn. Lena. Every single tray that emerged from her station vanished, sold out before the subsequent batch had even cooled. Customers initially arriving for coffee frequently departed with entire boxes of morning buns. Several specifically inquired by name if she was on duty that day. Some even left handwritten notes of gratitude, carefully folded between receipts and tucked into the tip jar. Jackson acutely observed that Lena never once lifted her gaze. She kept her head bowed, her hands in constant motion, her apron streaked with flour and sugar. She never paused for breaks, nor did she join her colleagues when Logan offered to cover their stations so they could grab coffee. When Zach, one of the younger team members, a college student working part-time, accidentally overturned a full tray of raw dough near her station, Lena neither scolded him nor even let out a sigh. Instead, she calmly knelt beside the mess and said softly, "First rule of baking, accidents happen." With swift, Confident hands. She salvaged what she could, her movements precise and completely unperturbed. Jackson moved to assist, but Lena raised a flour-dusted hand, without even glancing at him. "I've got this. You're new. You should be learning the front counter alongside Logan." Her gaze flickered to his for a solitary moment, brown, steady, and utterly unreadable, before she returned to shaping dough. There was no hint of arrogance in her tone, no trace of irritation, simply a quiet, firm boundary, indicating she was accustomed to working autonomously and fully intended to maintain that independence. Later that afternoon, amidst the post-lunch prep rush, Jackson found himself reassigned to the main kitchen. Raphael Cruz, the head baker on duty that day, assigned him light-duty tasks: portioning butter, cleaning trays, and replenishing flour bins. It became evident that Raphael had received instructions to keep the corporate guy away from anything truly critical. However, a substantial pre-order then arrived: 6 dozen almond morning buns destined for a nearby corporate brunch. "All hands," Raphael called out, his voice cutting through the din. "Evan, assist Lena." Jackson approached her station deliberately. She didn't glance up, but wordlessly slid around the dough towards him. "Fold like this," she instructed, demonstrating with a deceptive speed that seemed impossible for such a delicate process. "Not too tight, not too loose." Jackson intentionally mimicked her movements with feigned clumsiness. He could have performed the task blindfolded. Years prior, he had personally trained staff across the country in the precise art of rolling and proofing dough. But today, he was merely a trainee, and Lena was observing him. She noticed his deliberate awkwardness immediately. "Here," she said, gently placing her hands over his, guiding his motion. "Feel the tension in the dough. It will tell you what it needs." Her hands bore the marks of tireless work. Small scars, prominent calluses, the occasional faint burn. The kind of hands that eloquently spoke of long hours and precious little rest. As she subtly adjusted his folding technique, Jackson's gaze caught something peeking from beneath the cuff of her sleeve. A tattoo, a small, simple blacking flame, etched just above her wrist. "You've done this before," she stated abruptly, her tone now sharper with nascent suspicion. Jackson blinked, feigning innocence. "Just good with my hands, I suppose." Lena scrutinized him for a prolonged moment. Then, without uttering another word, she resumed her work. "Well," she muttered under her breath, "you're not terrible. That's significantly more than I can say for most trainees they send our way." The remainder of the shift unfolded in a blur of flour, oven heat, and hushed, infrequent exchanges. By day's end, Jackson's back ached acutely. His shoulders protested loudly, and his feet served as a painful reminder that he hadn't endured a true kitchen shift in over a decade. But Lena? She continued relentlessly, cleaning the ovens, meticulously reorganizing dry storage, and refilling the sugar bins. At one point, she single-handedly dragged a 50-pound sack of flour across the entire prep area, without a single request for assistance. Raphael observed this and spoke up. "Lena, you don't have to do that. We can certainly split it." "I don't mind," she replied stoically. By the time the bakery finally closed, Jackson observed her meticulously scrubbing the entire kitchen floor by hand, even as the others were prepping for the following day's work. When the last customer had long since departed and the front lights were finally dimmed, Lena removed her apron and silently washed her hands. She didn't join the staff heading out for post-shift drinks. She didn't glance at her phone. She didn't linger for a moment. She simply exited through the back door alone. On the drive back to the flagship location, Jackson immediately pulled out his phone and accessed Golden Harvest's internal archives, specifically delving into the product development folders from 8 years prior. He meticulously searched for any mention of Jason Hart. Nothing appeared under acquisitions, nor under vendor partnerships. Then, nestled within an archive subfolder titled Unsolicited Submissions, he finally found it. A scanned PDF, precisely dated and time-stamped. Submission proposal, Jason Hart. The subject line read, "Signature sourdough formula." Attached was a meticulously detailed pitch, complete with ingredient ratios, fermentation schedules, precise proofing techniques, projected cost margins, and even a concise write-up on market differentiation. The status at the top of the document starkly read, "Rejected. No fit for brand direction." Jackson frowned, a cold knot forming in his stomach. The formatting, the language, the precise timing, it all chillingly aligned with the imminent launch of Golden Harvest's Heritage Sourdough line, which was released just 6 months later. He then accessed the executive-only portal and retrieved the exact formula currently utilized in stores. The ratios were nearly identical. The base ingredients, the fermentation temperature, the specific flour composition, all perfectly matched the proposal Jason Hart had submitted. His heart began to pound with a furious rhythm. He delved deeper, accessing archived internal communications from that precise time period. A damning series of emails, conspicuously marked internal and confidential, immediately surfaced. From Connor Vance to Executive Product Team, the subject line read, "Innovative sourdough formula proposal for rollout." Jackson's gaze fixed on the screen. Connor Vance, then the Vice President of Product Development. The very VP who had departed the company 5 years prior amidst vague allegations of professional misconduct. The same man who had received a 6-figure bonus for developing the Heritage line. But the formula had not been his. It had belonged entirely to Jason Hart. The same Jason Hart who had tragically died a mere month after losing his cherished bakery, believing his innovative ideas had been utterly worthless. The same Jason whose sister was now systematically working herself to exhaustion to repay the crushing debt he had inadvertently left behind. The following morning, Jackson arrived even earlier than his established routine, at 4:15 a.m. He was unsurprised to discover Lena already present, meticulously measuring ingredients with the unwavering precision of someone who had performed the task 1,000 times in profound silence. "You're early," she noted, her gaze still fixed on her work. "Couldn't sleep," he replied truthfully. He hesitated, then added, "May I ask you something personal?" Her hands paused, hovering over the scale. "Depends on the question." "The flame tattoo on your wrist," Jackson ventured. "What does it signify?" For the first time since he'd known her, he witnessed her composure falter. A flash of profound pain flickered across her features before she meticulously schooled them back into a mask of neutrality. "It's to remember something I lost," she murmured, her voice almost imperceptible. She returned to her work, her movements now noticeably less fluid. "Something that can never be rebuilt." "A bakery?" he ventured, pushing gently. Her hands froze mid-motion. She looked up, her eyes suddenly piercing, sharp with raw suspicion. "How did you—" "Heart and Hearth," he said softly. "Your brother Jason's place." The rolling pin in her hand slipped, clattering loudly onto the counter. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. In that pivotal moment, looking into her face, exhausted, guarded, yet undeniably unbroken, Jackson made his decision. The masquerade had reached its end. Someone who believes you've been meticulously paying a debt that was never truly yours. She took an instinctive step back, her arms crossing defensively over her chest. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice wavering precariously. Jackson reached into his pocket and carefully unfolded a printed document, smoothing it deliberately on the counter between them. "Your brother submitted this to Golden Harvest 8 years ago," he stated. "A sourdough formula. The same precise ratios, the exact same fermentation process, the identical blend of heritage grains we've been utilizing ever since." Her eyes frantically scanned the page. Recognition, raw and overwhelming, swept across her face like a slow-breaking wave. How did you get this?" she gasped. "Because I'm not Evan the trainee." He met her gaze fully, his expression resolute. "My name is Jackson Reeves, and I am the CEO of Golden Harvest." All color drained from her face. She instinctively gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles turning white. "You're what?" "I've been operating undercover to fully comprehend why our Seattle store exhibited such peculiar financial patterns. But what I uncovered was far more profound than mere supply chain inefficiencies." He tapped the document, his finger emphasizing the truth. "This formula, it constructed our second most profitable product line, and your brother never received a single dime." "That's impossible," she whispered, shaking her head. Jason received a rejection letter 2 weeks before the fire. He was utterly crushed. Jackson nodded grimly. Officially, yes, but unofficially, it was systematically stolen by Connor Vance, our former vice president of product development. He appropriated your brother's original proposal, presented it to the board as his own innovation, and subsequently received a substantial bonus. The rejection letter was merely a meticulously crafted cover-up. Lena's legs instantly gave out, and she sank heavily onto a nearby stool. Her face was a maelstrom of confusion, disbelief, and long-buried grief. So all this time, she breathed, Jason's recipe has been generating millions, while I've been systematically working myself to the bone to repay his loan. The bakery remained profoundly quiet, the soft hum of the refrigeration units the only discernible sound in the background. The city outside lay dormant, utterly unaware of the seismic reckoning rapidly brewing within this small kitchen. "I don't understand," she finally uttered, her voice thin. Why tell me now? Why not simply fire me and sweep all of this under the rug, just like everything else?" Jackson pulled up a second stool and sat directly across from her. "Because what transpired with you and your brother was unequivocally wrong. And because this company, my company, owes you a substantial debt, not the other way around." He then pulled out a tablet and opened a detailed financial report. "I've meticulously tracked the revenue generated by the Heritage Sourdough line since its launch. Conservative estimates place the true value of your brother's contribution at over $4 million. Lena's eyes widened in stunned disbelief. "That's enough to clear my debt and then some." Jackson nodded. "I also thoroughly reviewed the original submission paperwork. There is a very clear clause stating that if we utilize any portion of a submitted concept, commensurate compensation must be provided." Vance deliberately bypassed that. She stared down at her hands, her fingers slowly tightening into white-knuckled knots. "Jason worked on that formula for years," she whispered, her voice laced with pain. "It was our grandfather's base recipe, but he meticulously modernized it. He genuinely believed it could change everything for us. When the rejection letter arrived, he truly believed he was a failure. That's precisely why he resorted to the Hamilton loan. He desperately wanted one more chance to prove his work had intrinsic value." Jackson felt the crushing weight of the company's profound failures settle heavily upon his shoulders, like solidifying cement. "I couldn't sleep a wink the night I finally connected all the dots. I kept replaying in my mind how many mornings I had savored our sourdough, utterly oblivious to its true creator, all while you were here, before dawn, baking simply to make yet another payment." Lena's voice was barely a whisper. "What happens now?" Before Jackson could formulate an answer, the back door swung open. Logan and 2 other early shift employees stepped inside, instantly freezing at the table before them. Lena seated, Jackson beside her, documents spread across the counter. "Evan," Logan asked cautiously, his voice laced with confusion, Is everything all right?" Jackson stood slowly, deliberately squaring his shoulders. "Logan, I need you to immediately call Monica and instruct her to come in right away. Then, I want you to contact regional management and formally request a 9 a.m. emergency meeting." Logan blinked, utterly bewildered. I don't think I could just tell them. Jackson interjected, his voice firm. "That Jackson Reeves is calling the meeting." Logan's eyes widened impossibly. "You're?" "Yes." Jackson turned back to Lena, who remained utterly motionless, a silent figure in the brewing storm. "In the meantime, we have some calculations to finalize." The subsequent few hours passed in a frenetic blur. As the bakery gradually filled with bewildered staff and increasingly anxious regional managers, Jackson and Lena remained closeted in the office, meticulously poring over documents, archived communications, and internal reports. By the time the emergency meeting officially commenced at 9 a.m., Jackson had compiled a comprehensive and utterly irrefutable case. Seated around the long conference table in the rear of the Seattle flagship store were 6 members of the Golden Harvest leadership team, most of whom had either flown in or video patched from neighboring regions. Lena sat quietly beside Jackson, her apron still visibly dusted with flour, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Jackson stood resolute at the head of the table. On the wall-mounted screen behind him, a stark slide was displayed, titled, Intellectual Property Breach, Heritage Sourdough Line. He wasted no time. 8 years prior, this company's second most profitable product line was constructed upon a formula meticulously submitted by Jason Hart, a local baker who tragically died believing his life's work was utterly worthless. He clicked the remote again. This, he announced, is his original proposal, submitted through the official innovation channel, time-stamped, verified, rejected on paper, yet fully adopted in practice. He flipped to a slide presenting a side-by-side comparison. Jason's precise ratios, fermentation times, and flour blend align exactly with the internal version later attributed to Connor Vance. This is not a coincidence, Jackson stated, his voice firm and unwavering. This is outright theft. Around the conference table, faces tightened, some contorted in disbelief, others etched with shame. Monica Fields, the store manager, appeared as though she'd been physically punched in the gut. Logan stood silently in the corner, arms folded, his gaze fixed. Lena remained utterly silent. She didn't need to speak. Her presence was enough. The next slide vividly displayed the lavish compensation package awarded to Vance. Over $250,000 in bonuses within just 2 years of the Heritage Line's launch. Another click revealed an internal memo, personally authored by Vance, presenting the formula as an in-house innovation. Connor Vance departed the company 5 years ago amidst unrelated misconduct claims, Jackson stated, his voice devoid of emotion. This specific issue, however, remained deliberately hidden until this very moment. A voice, tinny and sharp, spoke up over the Zoom connection. This is highly irregular, declared Evelyn Granger, the formidable chairwoman of the board. Going undercover without board approval, unearthing 8-year-old proposals, accusing former executives of intellectual property theft. With all due respect, Evelyn, Jackson interjected, cutting her off. What's truly irregular is that the individual whose family meticulously crafted this product has spent the past 8 years toiling in our kitchens to repay the very debt that your company's stolen formula helped create. He clicked the remote, instantly transitioning to a live screen share displaying Golden Harvest's internal product margins. This formula, he emphasized, has generated over $12.4 million in sales. Meanwhile, Lena Hart, Jason's sister and the undisputed co-creator of that very recipe, has declined every single promotion, steadfastly refused every raise, and continues to meticulously pay down a high-interest loan taken to save the very bakery your product line ultimately replaced. Another voice then joined the call, belonging to Franklin Doyle, the most senior board member. What, precisely, are you proposing, Mr. Reeves? Jackson didn't flinch. 3 things. First, immediate debt relief. Golden Harvest will entirely pay off Lena Hart's outstanding balance with Hampton Financial. A ripple of murmurs spread throughout the room. Second, retroactive compensation for the unauthorized use of her brother's intellectual property. Based on industry standards and comparable acquisitions, that figure stands at $3.2 million. That's utterly absurd, interjected Stephen Langford, the CFO. We can't just third, Jackson continued, overriding him smoothly. We establish a brand new position, head of artisan product development. Lena will oversee our entire handcrafted bread and pastry line, with full creative control and executive-level compensation, including significant profit sharing. You are significantly overstepping your authority, Mr. Reeves, Evelyn stated, her tone sharpening ominously. This proposal has not been reviewed.